Evening. Sorry. Good evening, everybody. We are in Joshua chapter 3 and 4 tonight. Figure we just tag along and pick up Joshua 3, even though we technically missed it on Sunday. I think it's short enough we can tag that in with chapter 4 and do this all together tonight. So let's begin with the word of prayer, and then we'll actually read both chapters together, and we can discuss it as a whole. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for another day that you've provided to us. We thank you for the blessings we have here at Brownsburg to gather together and to study your word. Please bless us in all the classes this evening, Father, as we study together. Help us to grow in the knowledge of who you are, who you'd have us to be, and who we can be together in the service of you, and ultimately in the service of your Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ. It's in his name that we pray. Amen. All right. I'd like to get through both chapters and have plenty of time to discuss, so let's go ahead and dive into chapter 3. Before we do, just a quick reminder, we just left off with the spies going into Jericho, talking with Rahab getting preserved and her family being preserved with the promise from the spies that, put the cord on the outside of their house and they'll be preserved when Jericho is destroyed. And so we pick up in chapter 3 following this interaction. It says, Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim. And they came to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel, and he lodged there before they passed over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, As soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from their place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it, about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go, for you shall not have passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, Take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. Then the Lord said to Joshua, Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, Here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man. And when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant, the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. The waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those flowing down towards the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. Chapter 4. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you, and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. For the priests bearing the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. The people passed over in haste, and when all the people had finished passing over, the ark of the Lord and the priests passed over before the people. The sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh passed over armed before the people of Israel, as Moses had told them. About 40,000 ready for war passed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. On that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him just as they stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests bearing the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan." So Joshua commanded the priests, "Come up out of the Jordan." And when the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up on dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. The people came out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, "When your children ask their fathers in the times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know. Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever." Chapter 3 and chapter 4 there. A lot of good stuff in this chapter. It's weird, if you're thinking of it like a TV show here, right? This is kind of like a transition show from, hey, one major event happened and now we're prepping for the next major event. But in the midst of these transition scenes, we get another major event, another huge moment, and also memorials established for this huge moment that is taking place here. So we've had the reconnaissance mission in chapter 2, and now we're actually seeing the people pass into the land of Canaan, into the promised land to take possession of it. John? Okay. Some interesting thoughts there. There's this time period John mentioned in chapter 3 that the people are told to consecrate themselves, and this period of preparing for the Lord is a period of 3 days. What is that, verses 5 through 8 kind of section here? Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. So they're kind of in this transition from going from one side of the Jordan to the other. We've already talked about the Reuben and Manasseh, and I'm spacing on the last guy. Is it Gad? I've read it like 15 times and I forget it. Forget one of the guys every time. Who's that third tribe that I'm spacing on? We got half of Manasseh. All right, I was right. Okay. Come on, guys. You got to tell me when I'm right up here. Those are the important responses. So Reuben, Gad, half of the tribe of Manasseh, their tribe's land is going to be on the eastern side of the Jordan, right? But they are coming across with the rest of the group because of the promise they made to support accomplishing the task to its total completion. Hey, we're going to go over with you, with our brothers, and accomplish this task and possess the land together, and then we can return back to our land. So they're on that eastern side. They're going to cross back in to the western side of the Jordan. But to get across the Jordan, you got to cross the Jordan. And a little bit difficult crossing a flooded river, right? It was kind of mentioned in verse 15, I think. Time of the year, flooding in that area. And so when you have a flooded river, more dangerous, high level of water, greater speed, debris probably in there, things like that, it's not just stepping over a little creek or anything like that. So they got to cross the river. But before we even get to them crossing over the Jordan, there's some interactions we see that God is relaying to Joshua. What does Joshua get told by God in the early parts of chapter 3? That's quite significant. I have to mention this because she's brought it up to me a couple times, but Dolores has told me multiple times she'll be watching at home when I ask these questions, and she says, I'm at home ready to answer, and I just wish you'd call on me. So I'm believing Dolores is shouting out the answer, guys. One of you just needs to relay it, and maybe she's going to text one of you, but what key information does Joshua get told about himself at the start of this chapter? Yeah, Lord's going to be with them, and in verse 7, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all the people. Like what? Like Moses, right? And this ties back into chapter 1, right? We talked about, to start this book, we've got this transition in leadership, right? We've got Joshua taking over for Moses. And multiple times throughout chapter 1, we hear that common popular phrase, be strong and courageous. But also there's this confirmation that God gives to Moses that I'm going to be with you like I was with Moses. You aren't going to be a lesser leader. It's not going to be a diminished relationship. It's not like, oh, I loved Moses, but you are kind of just who I'm left with now. It's like I was with Moses, I will be with you. And now we have confirmation from God telling him, hey, you're about to see, and everyone's about to see, how with you I really am. So it's not just going to be God displaying his power, which is certainly going to be shown, but also I'm going to let everyone know your place in this situation, who the leader is among this people, who I have appointed to lead this people. So while it doesn't give us tons of in-depth description of how God exalts him exactly, he is exalted, right? He promises Joshua he will exalt him before all the people. There's going to be some revealing. There's going to be some sort of recognition that's going to be shown not just to the elders, not just to the priests, but to everyone. All of Israel will see like this leader who God has chosen, this leader who God is with, just as he was with Moses. And so I figured we'd kind of just tie those two things in here together. It mentions that in chapter 3, and then in chapter 4, we see it fulfilled. And he was elevated just like Moses was elevated, and they revered him just like they revered Moses. And so very significant just from what we've started with in chapter 1, a new leader being set up over this people that is not yet in their homeland. They're in this time of turmoil because they've been in the wilderness for 40 years. They've still not set foot in the promised land to take possession of it. And there's been this huge change in leadership. You've lost this iconic figure in the history of your nation, and now you've turned it over to this new person. And from chapter 1, we've seen Joshua's leadership continue to be confirmed. We saw the start of chapter 1. It's about God, hey, relaying to Joshua, I'm going to be with you. Be strong and courageous. After that, it's confirmation from Joshua's actions, he is the leader. He's taking charge. He's commanding the people what to do based on what God has told him, and the people follow him, and they promise to follow him, right? So all those things were significant in chapter 1. We've seen that followed up in chapter 2 with the spies actually following through on their task, what they're supposed to do, and now we're going to continue to see that leadership shown and displayed from Joshua. Go ahead, John. Yeah, the people have already confirmed to Joshua, hey, all that you commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Right? That was in chapter 1, and the people have followed through on that to the letter, to the, crossing the T's, dotting the I's here. And so after we have Joshua interacting with God, what all is entailed with this crossing the Jordan? What has to take place for them to get across the Jordan River? Just got to stop the water, right? We have to figure out how to stop the water from flowing and, cutting us off at the knees or the legs or the wherever and blowing us down the river, right? I don't know if you can tell by anything about me, but I'm not much of a nature person. I have been outside before, but I don't dwell among the trees very well. But I have walked in a river bed before, and even in those small little creek beds, right? Especially when the water is moving, you have to resist a little bit, right? So this whole nation's got to cross this river, and we got to figure out a way to stop the water. And so how are they going to do it? What's the means that they stop the water, Jesse? Well, not all. Maybe some were very young, right? But yeah, at least some didn't, right? Some were born after that, and all of them would have been, what was the cutoff? Under 20? Is it under 20? So they were youngish, right? At the oldest, right? You're talking about teens for the older ones when they saw it, and most were probably younger, if not born at all. So kind of a new situation for them. John? Okay. Yeah, so it's almost as if whether, John mentioned maybe there's times of the year where you can cross at certain parts. It's made very clear in this chapter, right? That was not one of these times, right? The flooding made it to where it would have taken a miraculous act for them to walk across the river. And specifically, walk across it on dry ground, correct? So how are they going to cross it on dry ground? Because I don't believe if they just walked up to it that God was just going to let them pass through. What does he tell them to do? Got to take the ark. The ark's got to go before the people, right? Now, therefore, take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man, and when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. So, kind of a cool description in that we get even tiny details of how it's looking. They're crossing over the Jordan. Once the soles of the feet of the priests carrying the ark enter into the river, the water stops flowing. Like there's just an invisible dam that has been put up. And the water kind of recedes on the other side because it's just eventually going to trickle down and fall away. And then on the other side, it just gathers in this heap, this one heap, right? Now, as a curious-minded person, like I naturally kind of just think, like, how big does that heap keep getting as they're walking across this river, right? Like it just keeps raising and raising. But regardless, it's kind of like just, hey, it's winding down, but then we just stop it, right? And so once that dam's put in place, there's dry ground that is now there to walk across for all the people to follow after, okay? Yeah, so the 2,000 cubits John mentioned had to be away from everybody, 2,000 cubits, and part of that was so people could see it, right? Everybody could see it going out before them, leading the way. That's what we're following, and then even now, not just following it in terms of direction, but this is leading us to where do we cross? Where do we cross the river? Well, we see the ark, we go towards the ark, we cross where the ark is. Right? So it is literally directing them into the land. It is guiding the way. Now, where have we heard, and hopefully this is another easy one, but where have we heard the phrase walked across on dry land? Red Sea, right? So, and did anybody notice any other parallels between the Red Sea here and, the Red Sea back in Exodus and now here with the Jordan River? So we've got they walked across on dry land. Anybody else notice any other parallels of the two stories? Yeah, so on the Red Sea, right, there's walls on both sides. And this one, there's the wall or the heap that's set up on the one side. Anybody notice? So what separates the water? You can say God, that's technically right. But like, what is extended or has to go out to cause the water to split in the Red Sea? Moses' staff. Moses' staff is what's stretched out, take the staff in your hand, stretch it out, and then the water is split. In this situation, what splits the water? Right. It's the priest's feet once they set foot, but like in terms of that symbol, right, we have the ark stretching out or stretching into or going into the river, right? And what is the connection between the ark and the staff? What do those two things represent? Yeah, symbol of God's power, symbol of God's authority, symbol of God's presence, right? You know, Moses held the staff in his hand. That staff represented his chosen authority given to him by God. Hey, you will lead the people. You are speaking the things that I tell you to speak. That's what the staff was meant to be representing. Not the power that Moses had, but hey, I will give you the words to speak. I will give you the power to do these signs and wonders. And they will know when you do these things who has sent you. The ark, similar kind of thing. This will be my presence among you, right? This is God's presence among his people. Okay? Moses is gone now, right? But we still have Joshua, and regardless of the new leadership, God is among them. God leads the way. God's power is what is doing this. You are following God. And so God enters into the river. God's presence enters into the Red Sea and separates it, right? It's God's presence and his power being displayed in each of those situations. And so the parallels with that, they both walk across on dry ground, both the nation of Israel, and both situations reveal the same thing. Why did they do this? Verse 24, right? So all the people of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Right? We've talked ad nauseum of why God is doing this, why God is giving us this message, why God is, leaving these words for us and leaving the stories for other nations to hear, right? So that they may know who the Lord is, so they may know his power and know how mighty he is. And, specifically here for Israel, they may fear the Lord. Have that respect, have that awe, but also the fear of the power of God, right? Which is the beginning of knowledge. So all those things are kind of culminated in that purpose at the end of chapter 4. Hey, this is to still remind people who God is. Who is the God that goes with this people? Who is the God that Rahab saw and heard about in those stories, right? That's what she saw. I see a God over all other gods. I see the God of the heavens. That's who goes with Israel, and that's why this nation's afraid. That's why they've lost all fear. They don't have a leg to stand on, and that's still what God's displaying to his people in chapter 3 and 4 here as well. That covers a lot of chapter 3. Kind of ends with them actually crossing over the water, and then chapter 4 is kind of the fallout from that. So after they cross over the water, which I don't know why they mention this part or why, if it's significant in any way, but they crossed it in haste. They went across fast, or as fast as they could. I don't know why that needed to be mentioned, but I just think it's kind of an interesting tidbit there. So they cross in haste. Yeah, there is. And however wide the expanse ended up, I'm curious, they're walking across, the ark is staying in the one spot, but how wide, or what was the length in which they crossed the river once it had, the water had just kind of trickled away on the other side opposite the heap. But yeah, I can't be just wasting time too much. They got things to do, got places to be, right? So, but they cross in haste, and then what happens? So they don't just, now they're in the promised land. They're near the area of Jericho. They're in the area of Gilgal is where they actually set up camp. But before they just kind of head off and do their business, what do they got to do? What's God tell them to do? What's God tell Joshua to do? Yeah. So John mentioned he's got to get some stones. What kind of stones? From where? How many? Why? Okay, 12 stones from the Jordan to set up as a memorial. Eric, did I cut you off there? Okay. All right. So 12 stones from the Jordan as a memorial, right? I think we can, it mentions it in there, but you're getting those 12 stones for each tribe, right? They're each going to, 12 men were appointed to go get the 12 stones. Okay. And what were they supposed to do with those 12 stones? And so we make them into a memorial, but do they just toss them on the other side? How does God want them to set it up? Okay, so they pile them up. Now, I don't ask that as just to have a basic one-off question here, but why significant of piling up the stones? What do you not find stones doing just randomly? Yeah, they're not just stacked up on top of each other and be like, wow, nature is really cool sometimes, Like they wouldn't just fall this way. We do live in a time where people are just absolutely defiant in denying that there's a creator of things. People still think hey, we all just got here by an explosion. But I guess when I see a pile of stones, I don't think, man, what the most precise avalanche of all time just took place and landed right there. It's not, you see that, you think that was erected there for a purpose, right? At its core, before God even gets into the meaning of what it's for, the very main reason of getting the 12 stones and stacking them is people will see it and do what? Yeah, ask a question. Why? Does anybody have any? Let me see how you guys are good on popular geographical locations. Are people curious at all about a random assortment of stones that have been placed up somewhere for some reason on the earth? Yeah. Who cares about Stonehenge when we got this thing, though, right? Yeah. I don't know what's going on there, but God made sure, hey, we'll stack these stones up, and people will ask why. And here's the most important part. We'll give them an answer, right? We'll give them an answer. You can ask all the questions you want, but there is an answer to why these are going to be stacked up. Somebody had their hand raised. Sorry, Randy, go to you. I would never be able to make that connection. That going back to that, not a tree adventurer guy. I would just, Randy dropping good knowledge that if you've ever been hiking, right, those stones are kind of like a comfort. Like somebody came past here and put these up. Or I guess, could it be the flip side of at least I know someone else has been totally lost as I am as well. But yeah, no, very, very good, well said. And it becomes, I think Randy hit on a good point though. It also, not just the question of in that situation, you're not so much questioning who it is, but there's a comfort in that, the comfort in seeing that. Go ahead, Katrina. And then John after you. Oh, interesting. Okay. Huh. Very cool. Very cool. Sorry, John, as well. Yeah. I think we're talking about it right now, John. And we have you to think. It's funny. I was reading this chapter, and when I read that part, it's kind of like one of those things where you think, did I like pass out and then just like start reading like 4 verses earlier again? Because the language is very similar, right? Where it talks about placing the rocks and the 12 stones. But John's mentioning, where was that at? In verse 8? So in the midst of the Jordan, right? 12 stones up out of the midst of the Jordan. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. So you have the stones erected here. It's going to, we have this term of, a memorial to remember. And, you see this, you ask questions. Your children will ask, why did we do this? And then we'll tell them, when your children ask their fathers in the times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you'll let your children know, right? We've talked about how since they've gone out of the land of Egypt, there's been these commands to pass down these stories to their children. And that will be the way in which they keep these lessons alive, that they keep the values in which God wants them to hold. It's not just from the 10 Commandments themselves, but those become a part of you. You pass them on to become a part of your children, right? That's how the law becomes passed down. And then we see the flip side of it in the Old Testament as well, where it doesn't become a part of your hearts and actions and your motivations, and then it's not passed down to your children, and they forget, and they don't remember, and it's forgotten, right? Now, we have the piles of stones here. I think one other significant thing about the stones that I took out of it, and maybe it's not, maybe I'm diving too deep into this with this, but you can't get the stones in the Jordan without something miraculous kind of happening here. To get those stones from the midst of the Jordan, right? And I don't know why, I just kind of tend to believe these aren't pebbles, right? I mean, maybe the stone term is all I needed. But I guess I believed that these were some hefty stones, especially if you're going to erect them up to where they don't get knocked over or moved or, brushed over by an animal or something. I believe they were fairly substantial sized stones in order to have a permanent place there that would last. Well, it's hard to pick up stones, period, but standing in the midst of water and lifting them out of the center of the river and carrying them out of the river is near impossible, right? When the water is coming at you, right? To be able to lift stones from the midst of the water. And so the stones are also there as confirmation of these are stones from the midst of the Jordan. We got them when it was dry ground, right? We didn't go into the water to grab them. The water was stopped, and we picked them up when it was dry ground. And so all this stuff ties into the memorial together. Here's evidence in these stones when we walked across the Jordan River. Go ahead, Dan, and then Holly after you. Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever picked up a rock, if it's something you carry in one hand, you don't put it up on your shoulder. If it's something that takes you both hands to pick it up and you want to carry it for some distance, you'd probably rest it up on your shoulder. That's how I carry stuff that's really too heavy for me to hold my hand up, put it up on my shoulder, and I carry it like that. These are big rocks, and I believe Joshua takes those same stones and sets them in the Jordan while it's still dry at the place where the priest's feet stood. And that's the memorial that's supposed to remind them of what happened here. Those very stones that came out of the Jordan are set up as a memorial that would stand once the water started flowing again. So I picture something that's actually sticking up out of the water as the waters of the Jordan start flowing again. That would be visible to subsequent generations who would see that from the riverbank and go, what is that?
Yeah.
That's where we crossed the Jordan. That's where your God set the waters up, stacked them up as the priest stood, and the priests stood right there.
Yeah. I kind of get what you're saying about can you definitively confirm? I kind of went there as well in terms of my original thought, and then I was like, I think it's what's throwing me off is verse 8 talking about those 12 stones out of the midst of the water, and then yeah. So, but then it sounds like at mid of verse 8, like, and they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged and laid them down there. But then, like, Joshua sets up 12 stones in the midst. Yeah, but it. Yeah, so it's weird because it's almost like it's leading you to where then, and Joshua set them, but it's like you want like one key word to just make it definite. Like, yeah, it's those. Right. Yeah.
Set them down. So it gives each one of those stones a special significance.
Right.
And then Joshua takes them and makes a monument.
Yeah.
May have even ordered them together.
Right.
Made a structure out of those stones that sticks up out of the water as the water flows around it. And everybody who would see that from that point on would be like, what in the world?
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool memorial too. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know definitively, but I think that's as good of an idea as the alternative to two piles as well. Go ahead, John. I mean, it says they took them to their camp. I mean, when they took the stones out. But then it says Joshua sets up 12 stones in the midst. So it's like you could go either way. You could go either way. And I guess we could spend the rest of the time. And I think we get the people on this side and the people on this side. And we fight it out like good old Christian families do, right? But maybe we'll just say there was a memorial set up, and there were rocks, there were stones, and yeah. So that will. I think somebody wanted to go on to the next verse over here. Yeah, however it turned out, the main thing is your children will see it, they'll ask questions about it. Whether it's in Gilgal, whether it's in the midst of the water, whether it's in both, they're going to look at it and they're going to say, what is this, Dad? Why do we have this here? What's going on? They'll be like, oh, son, daughter, this is why This is God delivering us through the Jordan River. This is when we passed over on dry land as we were entering into the promised land. And so as they pass over, right, and they're all on the other side, even their eastern inhabitants, their brothers from the 2.5 tribes come with them and bring their 40,000 men. And they cross over. The priests carrying the ark, they leave and the waters return back to their original state. And so now they're all in the land of Canaan, right? They're in the promised land. They're on the footsteps of Jericho. They're in Gilgal. Chapter 5, I'll be out of town, but Dad's going to be doing chapter 5, which is a kind of a interesting chapter of, circumcision before combat. Probably not a lot of generals' first ideas of what to do, but they're in the promised land now. This is like a big deal, right? You've had this promise of, I don't want to say land, of land for a while now, right? For these generations. Now, one thing we didn't touch on that is very important. It tells us when they crossed over the river, right? When was that? It's the 10th day, right? Does anybody know why that has some significance? So 40 years to the day, or I believe, from them getting the Passover being instituted to now when they cross into the promised land. Those 40 years just hit its countdown clock. The buzzer sounded. The buzzer has sounded, and now they're in the promised land. Now things are about to, I guess they've already been real, but things are about to get even more real in terms of like the fulfillment of this second promise, right? They've seen this nation built over the last several hundred years. The last 40 years, they've seen wonders in the wilderness. The law has been given to them, the tabernacle. They've seen the presence of God among them in the pillar of the cloud, in the plagues, in the fire. All these things they've been witnessing. But it's still important to think back to that song that they sing when they go across the Red Sea. And we see like there's still that drive to get to that home. It's still about a group of people trying to find their home. And the tragedy of the previous generation is they weren't willing to go accept it. It was offered to them and they rejected it. They didn't trust it. And now the joy of Joshua as we get into this story is they're ready. This people is ready to go attain the promise that God has laid out for them, right? And they're confident that God is going to deliver it into their hands. That was the awesome scene in chapter 2 with the spies. They come back to Joshua and it's like, yeah, God's given this into our hands, right? We're ready for this now. We believe and God has delivered us. And, so first scene here in chapter 4, when they're actually in the land, right? First thing you need to recognize now, being in the land, who got you here, right? Remember that it was the hand of the Lord. The hand of the Lord is mighty. Fear the Lord your God forever, right? Not just you, but your children and their children and their children and so on and so forth, right? So we don't forget these stories. We pass them on, and they build up in us this fear of the Lord, this respect for God, this trust in God, and this, the faith that Moses had, that Abraham had, that all their ancestors who lived their lives according to trusting in this promise, right? That's why it's so big when we read this story of like, wow, this is like actually happening because of all these generations before them and these people that are memorialized in Scripture and remembered for their faith, believing this was going to happen. And now they're going to see this fulfilled. And so all of this is very significant for those reasons. I did see, not to get too, I won't get too linguistic because I did see that there's some terminology where Hebrew actually means one who has crossed over, So they do a lot of crossing over. You know, Abraham's first called the Hebrew, but he crossed over into the promised land, right, in his journeys, and then now we've got them crossing back over into the land as well. Katrina, did you have a closing comment? Yeah, very, very well said. I guess it just depends on which pile of stones we're talking about, though. All right, thanks everybody for your comments.